Hello and welcome back to the Economist's New York EastMed Summit. My name is Joan Hoey and I'm Director for Europe at the Economist Intelligence Unit. I'd like to welcome all of you to our next panel, Boosting the Region's Recovery Through Stability and Cooperation. So in this panel, we're still going to be focused on doing business in the Eastern Med region and looking at how the region can attract more investment. But we're going to have a look at from a regional perspective and look at the opportunities for new partnerships and new growth models. So we have, again, 4 speakers who I'd like to introduce now. The first speaker is Shelly Porges, co-founder and managing director of Beyond the Billion and the $1 Billion Fund for Women. Welcome. The next speaker is Michalis, who's the chairman of Invest Cyprus. The next speaker is ARISTOS Constantine, trade commissioner at the Cyprus Embassy Trade Center, New York. And the final speaker on the panel this afternoon is Alex Boulougouris, who is the CFA and co-head of research at Wood & Company. Let's turn to our third speaker, ARISTOS Constantine, who's the Trade Commissioner at the Cyprus Embassy Trade Center in New York. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thank you. And good morning from New York. It's cloudy and rainy here. Given the time constraints, I'll do my best, I think, to address the 3 questions posed to the panel in the agenda. So, firstly, is there optimism for the region? Absolutely. That's a resounding yes. From a regional perspective, what we're seeing in the EastMed, granted with the exception of Turkey, is an unprecedented degree of cooperation and collaboration. And it is secular and modernist. And the defining factor at the core of this growing regional integration is balance. Balance of interests, balance of values. And this is a very powerful model. Just last week in Cairo, representatives of Egypt, Greece, Italy, Cyprus, Jordan, and Israel concluded an agreement to convert the EastMed Gas Forum into a regional organization, one that is open to everyone. France has already requested to join the forum earlier this year, and the United States is a permanent observer, which lends important international weight. But it's important to note that this is not just about natural gas. While energy may have been a catalyst, the collaboration within the region has expanded far beyond energy. Cooperation, particularly between Cyprus, Israel, and Greece, spans almost every conceivable field, from counterterrorism to environment, technology, and trade. And I don't think it would be overstating to say that the EastMed, with Cyprus at its center, has become a true model for regional collaboration and integration. And this integration brings with it opportunity for growth and investment and the ability to tap previously untapped synergies and to build and connect markets. Now, within a broader geoeconomic context, why is the integration of the EastMed so important? Leading to our next sort of question, how do our new partnerships translate into new opportunities? Well, the world has become, and at least for the foreseeable future, I believe will continue becoming more and more multipolar, both politically and economically. And I know that many don't like to accept this as a foregone conclusion, but it is what it is. German Chancellor Angela Merkel acknowledged as much earlier this year in a Financial Times interview when she noted Europe can be a pole that takes on its share of responsibility in a multipolar world. Of course, the US trade war with China has been a big factor in accelerating the move away from globalization. And some are no doubt hopeful that in the event of a change in administration come November, US-China tensions would de-escalate. Personally, whilst the rhetoric, in that eventuality at least, whilst the rhetoric may come down a notch, I don't believe that will be the case, at least not in any meaningful way. The COVID pandemic has also contributed. It revealed very early on the fragility of modern supply chains and sparked a push toward more secure, regionalized manufacturing and supply and shorter, smarter supply chains. The EU has also indicated a move in this direction, as the EU Trade Commissioner said in April, there is a need for the EU and its companies to diversify supply chains and to reduce reliance on individual countries. But, as he noted, that doesn't mean bringing all production back to Europe. So while Eastern Europe could now play a larger role in the EU supply chain, a relocation of production away from Asia, from China, could also include Northern Africa and other EastMed countries. And Cyprus specifically, the region as a whole, but Cyprus specifically could also benefit through its role as an investment, trade and logistical hub. With regard to the US, I think these points that I've just mentioned also come into play. But as Michalis said in his talk just a moment ago, Cyprus is very well positioned to be an ideal base for US multinationals, private equity, and funds for operating and investing in the wider region, as well as in the European Union itself. And this is especially true since, after Brexit, Cyprus is now one of the very few common law jurisdictions left in the EU. And that is not something to be understated. A good example would be the rise of ESG funds investing in emerging markets. Cyprus is very well positioned to be an ideal jurisdiction from which to manage sustainable investments in the wider region and beyond into other emerging markets. So given the current climate, the EastMed as a region has the opportunity to expand its role as a key geostrategic and economic player. And in this new world of multilateralism, we have all the makings of an important swing region, able to facilitate both strong intra-regional commerce and trade, but also inter-regional commerce and trade. Moving on to the last point about a more resilient growth model, and I think that applies also to the region, but I'll keep it specific on Cyprus in this particular instance. So in the shorter term, obviously, as is mentioned frequently in the past panels, the economic impact of the COVID pandemic is not something we can just gloss over. Travel and tourism have been particularly hard hit, and unemployment in these sectors is undoubtedly a point of concern. But Cyprus has already done an outstanding job of stemming the fallout. And going forward, we have an opportunity to take decisive and in some cases overdue actions to diversify and strengthen our economy and generate employment and growth in new sectors. And to this end, public-private partnerships will no doubt be very important, as will be the intra-regional synergies I've just talked about. And for one, I believe our agricultural and industrial sectors have enormous potential, both as engines for growth and generators of employment. But there are equally promising opportunities in other sectors, healthcare, manufacturing, particularly tech and clean tech. And as Minister Petrides mentioned in the previous panel, Cyprus also has the seeds of a growing startup ecosystem, which has great prospects for growth. And let's not forget that the broader region has nearly 500 million people with a growing and significantly younger population. These young societies are rapidly urbanizing, and in the coming decades, the region will evolve into another leading consumer-based and services economy, and will begin to resemble Western Europe more and more in its consumption habits. And we are very well positioned to benefit from that development. Look, we have the advantage that we are a small and adaptable economy with a very highly educated and versatile population. And I believe that we have what it takes to become the equivalent of a Singapore for our region. All we have to do is rise to the occasion. Thank you.
Thanks. That's really interesting perspective, regional perspective there. So final question for the other two panelists, Mr. Constantine and Mr. Boulougouris. So Mr. Constantine, in your introduction, it was very interesting. You approached it from a kind of broader, geopolitical perspective as well, and how the region fits into this, and obviously certain trends, geopolitical trends, that have been again accelerated as a result of the pandemic, including with regard to supply chains and deglobalization and so on. So And from Mr. Boulougouris, you're involved in the broader region as well, Eastern Europe. So I wanted to really ask you, you know, how this particular region stands to, you know, benefit from some of these trends, perhaps. So if we're talking about reshoring or nearshoring, do you think that Cyprus and Greece have an advantage maybe over the broader region, Eastern Europe region? It'd be interesting to hear from both of you your perspective on that. And I guess it's, you know, it's also about comparing political stability in the broader Eastern Europe region and in this region, how labour markets, infrastructure, and so on. How well placed do you think Greece and Cyprus are to benefit from some of the geopolitical changes that we're seeing?
So, as I said in my remarks, granted, Eastern Europe is cheap and competent and will no doubt play a larger role as things shift to closer or shorter supply chains. But as I said before, given the proximity, our proximity and our access to the West Asian markets, to North African and East African markets, and I'm speaking of Cyprus now, some of these aspects are also true for Greece, but Cyprus and Greece are not identical in terms of the role that they can play in within the region or vis-a-vis Europe. Cyprus, as I said before, has some advantages in that it is both common law and has a very broad network of not just double tax treaties, but investment treaties as well, which allows for companies operating to avail themselves to the protections of those treaties. So if you're looking to access emerging markets or markets in the region, we make sense, we make tremendous sense, especially for Western interests, to base their operations out of. When you talk about future growth, whether it's for the region itself or for the country, as I said in my remarks, I think we have tremendous potential to be a very important swing region in the current climate and the climate going forward, at least for the foreseeable future.
Thank you very much. But I think it was a very useful panel and provided some regional and broader perspective for the discussions that we had earlier in the day. So thank you very much for your insightful contributions, and thanks for joining the conference today.